Still on her knees, Emma tried to figure out how to free her legs. Ignoring the pain in her legs, she sat on her haunches and fingered the binds on her ankles. Her fingers were numb too, but she worked them on the binds until she found the end of a slim rope. It was twine. She pushed and pulled on the knot until she felt it loosen. Welcome back, my friends. I hope you are doing well. I truly appreciate your loyalty, and super thanks to those of you that are new. I'm still waiting to hear from you, and I promise to respond. Now let's get back to the story. It wasn't easy, but she didn't have anything else to do. She worked the twine until it loosened enough to free her ankles. Then she concentrated on standing up. The wall was useful again, as she leaned heavily on it to stand. She endured the pain of pins and needles, but she was standing. She stood there for a long time waiting it out, and then she bent over to touch her toes a few times. She needed to limber up to pass her legs through her bound arms. She succeeded the second time she tried it. With her teeth, she worked on the twine around her wrists. Being free empowered her, and she chuckled to herself. She walked around familiarizing herself with her surroundings. With her hands on the wall, she realized that she was in a fairly large room. When her feet hit an object, she bent down to inspect it. It was a metal bucket, and beside it were mops. Then she found the door. She tried the doorknob, but it was locked. Naturally, she thought. She began to bang and yell out. "Help! Somebody help!" she screamed. She did that in what she estimated to be 10-minute intervals to conserve her strength. Nothing happened. It was either the dead of night or she was in an isolated place where no one would hear her. The last thing she expected was the door to fly open and backhanded into silence. "Shut up, bitch!" The hard hand struck again. Emma fell back and hit her head against the wall behind her. She hit it hard enough to see stars. So it was coming to pass, she thought. So be it then. She was going to fight for her life. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" she asked. "I'm the man who's going to show you what it is to be a man. That weak-assed Walter had no balls because he let you live. I've enough balls for the both of us, and bitch, you are going to beg me to kill you." Hot bile rose up Raphael's throat, but he choked it down. She was just like Maribel. Innocent-looking, but so evil. Emma sucked in her breath. "What have I done to you?" "I don't even know who you are," Emma said, trying to reason with him. With enough light pouring in, she could see him. His hair was in a braid now, and she was very afraid. His arms looked like clubs. How was she going to fight him? "You should have been the one to die, not my son. Walter was a coward who hired someone to kill him, but he let you live." "Who was your son?" Emma approached him cautiously. "Ephraim Rivera. Because of you, he's gone. Because of you, he and I will never have a chance to work together. We had plans, and now I got nothing," he shouted at her. One more time, his hand connected with her face, and this time, Emma tasted blood. "Look, I'm sorry your son is dead," Emma said through numb lips. "But you have to understand that I had nothing to do with his death. Walter was the one who hired a hitman. Your son was just a student in my class at the college," Emma explained. Again, the hand crossed her face. This time, she cowered in fear and openly sobbed. She pleaded with him to stop hitting her, and for her trouble, he grabbed at her and pushed her against the wall. The same rough hand now caressed her face, causing Emma to try to shrink away. "Before I kill you, I'm going to do what Walter didn't have the balls to do. I'm going to show you how a real man does it." Emma's face changed for a split second. He was a young boy again staring at Maribel's face. "This is what men do," she told him. Desperation and pure adrenaline coursed through Emma's veins, and she shoved at him. He was stronger and shoved back. Suddenly, she couldn't breathe. His big, beefy hand was squeezing her throat, and she couldn't keep fighting anymore. Helplessly, she felt him pulling up her shirt. He groped at her, and she felt such revulsion that bile rose up her closed-up throat. She couldn't speak. She was too weak, and her vision blurred. The only sound she could make was a faint moan. He pinched her hard, and she winced. "I'm gonna have me some woman tonight," he whispered in her ear as he pulled his hand away. His breath was foul. He laughed at the sudden fear he could see in her face. "Oh, God in heaven, please don't let this happen to me," Emma prayed silently. If he touched her again, she would surely die, she thought. He loosened his hold, and Emma let out a wail so loud, his hand immediately clamped over her mouth again. "Didn't I tell you to shut your mouth? If you scream again, I'll make sure you regret it." Emma moaned. No, no, no. There were no words in the human language to describe what Emma was feeling. Raphael knew he had triumphed. He watched her face take on pure, unadulterated fear. He was in control now. He was the man. He had that bitch exactly where he wanted her. This is what Walter should have done. Instead, he let her go. What kind of man didn't handle his business? A wimpy bitch, that's who. And he ain't no bitch. He had the power now. He was going to show her good. Oh no, look what she made me do. Raphael flung her away from him, and Emma let her limp body fall to the floor, the evidence of his shame, on the floor between them. She didn't care. She was too busy thanking God for keeping her from harm. She barely heard the barrage of curses he shouted at her. She knew she was safe for now, and that was much more important. He left after he taped up her mouth, and she was in the dark once more. With trembling fingers, she fastened her pants and slid to the floor. She had taken a quick look around and recognized that she was in a janitor's closet. It was unusually large, and there was a sink. She crawled over to it to relieve herself and then turned on the faucet to drink. She spat out the rust that flowed and let it run until it was clear. Then she drank. She started to shiver. She supposed it probably was delayed reaction. And then she cried. Her tears spilled over the tape across her mouth. She cried until she was spent. Afraid that he might come back, she tried to stay awake, but fell asleep out of exhaustion. Earl and Paul met early and entered the station. First thing was to check in with Dobbs, and after getting the cold shoulder, they headed for the chief's office. He was at his desk and looked up when the partners entered. He smiled weakly and stood up. He came around to shake their hands and then sat on the edge of his desk facing them. What can I do for you boys? Has Dobbs filled you in on his progress? Dobbs has nothing. We're here to ask if you could make a call for us. We need to speak with Walter Bolton. If possible, we'd like to see him. Paul spoke first. The chief rubbed his chin and nodded. I could make the call, but I must warn you that as lead detective on the case, Dobbs needs to be informed of your doings. Bolton was supposed to be transferred upstate. Great Meadow, I believe. I don't care if Dobbs needs to know. We need to speak with Walter, Earl snapped. He hadn't meant to be short, but any mention of Dobbs twisted something in his gut. Chief, I didn't mean, I understand, son. I'll see what I can do about Walter. He reached over to pat Earl's shoulder. The partners got up and left the office. Until they knew if they could see Walter, there wasn't much to do. They decided to check in with the school superintendent to see if the site they had approved was released for their use yet. It turned out it wouldn't be until the renovations were completed. They had a free week. Earl didn't want any more well wishes concerning his wife. It was too much. He thought he was doing well until he realized that he wasn't. Not thinking about what Emma could be going through, enduring any pain was too much, and his eyes glazed over. Hey man, are you okay? Paul asked, concerned. I just need to get out of here. He didn't give Paul any arguments and took the passenger seat. Paul kept stealing glances at him as they drove away. Earl's cell buzzed and he scrambled to answer it. It was the chief. He told Earl that Walter was on the list for visitors by alphabetical order. As luck would have it, he could have visitors on Thursday, which was the following day. The chief also mentioned that Dobbs made an appointment to have a phone conversation with Bolton on Friday. Earl relayed what the chief said to his partner, and they quickly made plans to take the trip to Great Meadow Correctional Facility. If they left as soon as they could make the 8 a.m. check in the following morning. Paul swung by his house to change and stash his gun, then drove Earl to his house to do the same. They drove in shifts. Every 2 hours, they switched to avoid getting tired. After the third switch, they stopped to get something to eat. It was late, and the diner they stopped at had fairly decent food. Comstock was really a nothing town. The prison was the biggest thing in it. They had to get in line to check in. The line was long, and the partners were surprised at how many children were on the line. It was sad. The mothers looked comfortable, like it was no big deal to bring their children to see their fathers in prison. As sad as it appeared, these mothers should also be commended for trying to keep the continuity of their families going, even if they had to travel hundreds of miles to do it. Walter didn't like jail at all. He had sat at Rikers waiting for his transfer to Great Meadow Correctional Facility for 5 months. He regretted his choices. They were poor indeed. If he had not ordered the hit on those two idiots, maybe things would have turned out differently. But through it all, He hadn't wanted the woman hurt. It was in the news on every channel on TV that she had been kidnapped again. His fellow inmates had gotten very interested in him lately. The little time he had spent with her was impressive. She had a quiet dignity about her. Even at the warehouse, when the guys had wanted to have a little fun with her, she had kept her wits about her. Most women would have forced his hand to be violent, but she used her brain, and it had saved her. She hadn't tried to run away or fight. Instead, she had stayed calm. The time at Rikers Island almost brought a smile to his face. That was where he had met Spook. Walter looked around his cell walls, and this time he smiled. Spook was a black inmate. He was going to be released. He had spent his entire adult life in prison for murder. He was named Spook because he was easily frightened when he first entered prison. His fellow inmates used to have fun scaring him. The name stuck. Walter doubted if Spook remembered his own name. Spook was a natural artist and had spent his free time drawing. He showed Walter his drawings, and he had been impressed. One piece in particular had caught his attention because it was so vivid. It was a scene of a flower-filled meadow with children playing in it. Spook told him that it was one of his favorites too. Spook transferred to Rikers Island along with Raphael, a tough Hispanic man who took it upon himself to protect the old man. They were from the same facility. Spook died a few days before his release and had insisted that Walter take his collection of drawings. His parole officer was going to have him placed in a nursing home, and Spook felt that he wouldn't be able to keep his drawings, so Walter accepted them graciously. He was left with Raphael to deal with. Walter disliked Raphael on sight. He did nothing but lift weights, watch gangster movies, and harass other inmates. But since he was kind to Spook, Walter tolerated him. Rafael Carlos Rivera had not been rehabilitated. It all came together for him why Raphael stuck to him during his stay at Rikers. A few days ago, the news of Professor Grant's abduction reached him. The few inmates that he associated with told him. They said that someone was copying him. No one came to mind but Raphael. The man almost hero-worshipped him. Walter had been conned into thinking that he was a celebrity where Raphael was concerned. Walter had been free with the stories of his exploits. He remembered how attentive Raphael had been, asking questions and complimenting him. Raphael had been extremely interested to hear about the kidnapping. Walter had clammed up then. He didn't feel that taking the professor was something to be proud about. Nevertheless, he had given Raphael a little tidbit, a small gig at the pizzeria. From all reports, he was working out well. Earl and Paul sat in the waiting area after filling out forms and producing identification. It was easier once the men behind the desk realized they were fellow police officers. At 9 sharp, they were allowed in ahead of everybody. And since they were police officers, they were given a private room. The wait for Walter was another 20 minutes. When he entered the room, he stopped in the doorway, and he didn't seem surprised to see them. Detectives Solano and Derek. What a pleasant surprise. He completed his entry and sat down. A guard stood at the door after securing Walter to his chair. "Mr. Bolton, you are looking well. It seems that prison agrees with you," Paul said. "I think I understand why all of the sudden I have become so popular here. Word is that your wife has been kidnapped by a copycat, Detective Solano. I am sorry." Earl regarded him for a minute and then let out a breath. "Mr. Bolton, since you've already surmised why we are here, let's cut to the chase. We have a few questions for you, and I would prefer if you were cooperative." Walter smiled genially. "Of course. I have a feeling that whoever took your wife means her harm, and I really don't want that. So how can I help?" "Good. Can you tell us if there is anyone who hasn't been arrested yet along with you out there? I received a note about revenge." Detective Solano, I had taken full responsibility for what I had done. Apart from Rivera and Santiago, and the hired gun, no one else had any active part in what happened. We questioned the men at the warehouse, and we've confirmed that Sterling is still in Europe. I have a feeling that whoever took my wife isn't just a copycat. What can you tell us about that?" Earl asked, leaning forward. Walter looked from one detective to the other and nodded. When he heard about the kidnapping, his thought went straight to Raphael. His gut told him that he had something to do with it. Another inmate told him that Ephraim was Raphael's son. "Detective, before I was transferred here, I met a man at Rikers. He seemed very interested in me, and at the time I was foolish enough to think that he was complimenting me. It wasn't until he had been released that someone told me that he was Ephraim Rivera's father. I suggest you look into him. He might be the one who took your wife. We've already made the connection. Is there anything else you can tell us about him? Did he tell you what he planned to do when he got out? Asked Paul. No, but I truly hope you catch him. He's mean, and I don't think he'll treat your wife well, Detective Solano, Bolton said and stood up. The guard took him away, and Paul and Earl left the facility. For the first hour, they said nothing to each other. Both were thinking hard on what they learned and what they could do about it. They also knew that Walter Bolton will tell Dobbs everything he told them. They needed to act before Dobbs messed everything up. They drove straight through, and when they saw the New York City skyline, they heaved a sigh. The trip was long and traffic was bad. Paul turned to let Earl know and found that he was sound asleep. He hated to wake him because it probably was his first peaceful sleep he'd gotten in a few days. Hey man, we're home. I don't know about you, but I'm going to shower and get myself a beer and sleep till noon. Earl stretched and nodded. He was tired and felt that he could sleep a little more. It was understood that they would keep the information they got from Walter to themselves. Dobbs wasn't doing squat to find Emma, so it was up to them to do so. A good night's rest, and they would meet in the morning. One lone reporter approached Earl as he walked to his front door, and Paul had already driven away. Detective Solano, I am a reporter with Channel 5. Could I have a few minutes of your time? I know you mean well, but I don't understand why you feel the need to report this. There isn't anything I can say to you that will satisfy what the public is looking for. This is a tragedy. I am tired and would be grateful if you'd leave me alone, Earl told him. The public is very interested, but not for sensationalism's sake. A lot of people care. Maybe you could give us an update? The reporter insisted. No, I'm sorry. I am not an active member of the investigative team. You would do well in asking Detective Dobbs questions on his progress. He is the lead detective on the case. Good night. The reporter wrote something down on his little pad and left. Earl continued to the door. He leaned against the door once inside and closed his eyes. Then he walked up the stairs to bed. It was in the back of his mind to search the house, but he was too tired. Besides, Dobbs has someone patrolling the block, checking for anything out of the ordinary. He fell asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. The following morning, he awoke and showered to clear his head. He felt like he'd been drugged. That comes from no sleep and lots of running around. He went downstairs to make coffee and to call Paul. He detoured to answer the door for his partner. Paul entered and clapped Earl on the back. Man, you look like death warmed over. Didn't you get any sleep? I did, but apparently it wasn't enough. Want some coffee? Asked Earl as he led the way to the kitchen. They passed the living room and office on the way, and Paul noted the lights on it, the office. Yeah, how long did you work last night? I didn't. Why? Paul pointed to the office. The door was ajar and the light shone inside. Earl pushed past him and entered the office. The desk lamp was on. Earl was surprised he hadn't noticed it the night before. He did a quick inventory and found nothing missing. The window was shut and didn't look like it had been tampered in any way. He knew he hadn't entered the office last night, and he was sure he hadn't left the lamp on when he retrieved his notes the day before either. He rushed upstairs to see if the logs were still in the nightstand drawer. They were, and he'd found Emma's rings on the dresser and thought nothing of it as he put them in his wallet. Now he was glad that he did. Nothing else looked amiss, but someone had entered his home during the night. He found Paul in the living room when he went back downstairs, and the look on his face was pale. Paul pointed to a small package of brown paper tied with a string in the middle. Earl's hands shook when he reached for it. He stopped and asked Paul to get him a pair of gloves from the kitchen. Sure now that he wouldn't destroy any prints, Earl picked the package up and untied it. Emma's torn and blood-stained underwear filled his hand. Violent and vicious images filled his head, and Earl wasn't aware that he had fallen to his knees. His whole world had collapsed. A pain like he had never before known filled his heart. Paul took the underwear from his clenched hand and helped his partner to a seat. Then he called Dobbs. Without giving him much detail, he told him that a package was delivered to the Solano residence and that he should know. Within the hour, the house was filled with police and forensics personnel. They swept the whole house and found no prints other than the Solano family. Dobbs questioned him, and Earl answered in monosyllables. There was no doubt in his mind that Emma was right all along. She knew this was going to happen, and he hadn't been able to prevent it. She was at the moment in the hands of this monster, being molested. The fear he'd felt the first time is nothing compared to what he was feeling now. The chief hung back because he wanted a private word. He handed Earl an envelope containing the last note. There was only the number 0, in big bold strokes. Time was up. He told the partners that Dobbs already had a copy and that they could keep it. Forensics told him that they would get in touch with him with results from the underwear. Paul poured him a glass of scotch he'd brought with him. At first, Earl didn't want it, but Paul pushed and he drank some. The next thing they did was call a locksmith to come place locks and alarms on all the windows and doors. As the locksmith worked, Dobbs gave him a lecture on safety. Earl's hands clenched into a fist and the chief had to come between them. Dobbs left with a smirk on his face. Paul sat across from his partner and waited. After it was just the two of them left in the house, Earl suddenly came out of the stupor he'd been in, and his eyes looked sharp. "It's not hers," he said. "What are you talking about? What's not hers?" "Those aren't Emma's underwear. My wife only wears cotton." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. The bastard is playing games with me," he said in clipped tones. "What do you want to do?" "We need to go talk with his ex-wife again." Slapping a couple of sandwiches together, the partners ate and drove to Brooklyn. It was a little after 4 in the afternoon, and the former Mrs. Rivera wasn't too happy to answer her door. She wasn't babysitting and allowed them in. She answered their questions. The former Mrs. Rivera told them that they had married right after high school. She was 17 and he was 2 years older. She had been pregnant with Ephraim. Raphael worked odd jobs to support them, but his penchant for drugs and alcohol got him into trouble often. The last time she'd seen him, Ephraim was 8 years old. They divorced and she remarried a year later. The man she married had been kind to Ephraim, but he ran away when he turned 16. Twice before he turned 18, she'd gone to court for Ephraim. After that, she stopped appearing. She had other children and a life to live. In her eyes, she thought she had done all she could for her son, but she wasn't surprised that he was no good, just like his father. Earl had asked specific questions about the places he hung out at and the friends they had. She didn't know about all that because she hadn't seen nor heard from him in years. As the partners got up to leave, she told them that a mutual friend told her that Raphael was seen in their old neighborhood. President Street by the school, she said. GPS told them that it was just a few miles from where they were, and the partners decided to check it out. It had gotten dark, and as they drove, they discussed what they'd learned about Ephraim and Raphael. President Street was a quiet residential street with rows of brownstones, neat little front stoops, and not a blade of grass in sight. The name of the street clicked in Earl's head, so he started paying attention. It was part of the puzzle. When they drove past the school, his heart began to pound. This had to be it. This has got to be the place. Raphael's note stated that presidents and saints shared the same closets, Earl told his partner. "You think he's got her stashed in the school?" "It's a place to start, I guess, but school's out for the summer, and we have to find out if this school runs a summer session. We can come back in the morning. I know that you want to barge in right now, but if we are wrong, we'll have Dobbs dogging our steps from now on." "Better we go in there proper," Paul cautioned Earl. "You're right, of course. I can't stop thinking about that underwear. It may be that he's got more than one woman. It's been 4 days since she's been gone, and that last note was a 0. Time's up, and I keep thinking about his revenge quote. This is Friday. We'll have to wait the entire weekend before we can check out the school. It may be too late by then. Damn, we've got to at least check to see if there is anyone on the premises. Maybe a janitor still at work," Paul said, and slid the car into a parking space in front of the school. Earl got out and walked to the metal door of the school and rang the bell. He noted that the school was enclosed in a big black gate. He returned to the car when no one answered. They drove further down the street toward 6th Avenue, and out of the corner of his eye, Earl noticed a dilapidated structure across from the school. There was a sign on it, but it was too faded to make out. It looked like storage space. It was old and in disrepair. He made a mental note to check that too. Later that evening, Earl changed and left. There was something he had to do, and he'd been putting it off. It was by far the hardest thing he had to do in his entire life. He had to face Samantha Grant. He'd called ahead to let her father know that he was coming over. Matt assured him that it would be just the three of them. When he reached their street, he slowed down, dreading it. He parked and the front door opened. Matt was standing there waiting for him. "Daddy Earl," Sam called out. Her father clasped her hand to keep her from running out to him. Earl bent down to embrace her when she flung herself at him. She was crying. "Daddy Earl, did you find my mommy yet? Why don't we go inside, sweetheart?" Earl carried her inside and tried to set her down. She clung to him, and he felt awful. "Did you find her? Did you catch that awful man? Are you feeling as heartbroken as little Sam right now?" Keep watching to see how Earl handles this heart-wrenching scene. "Not yet, but I'm close. Paul and I are very confident that we will catch him soon. I need you to do something else for me. I want you to pray your most excellent prayer tonight before you go to bed. We are going to need all the help we can get. I also wanted to tell you how proud of you I am. Your description helped me identify the man who took your mother, and I think you are the bravest little girl in the world." "I want to thank you for that," Daddy Earl said. "You mean it was an Indian?" Matt asked. "Not quite. We narrowed it down to a Hispanic man wearing his hair long and loose. I'm telling you all I know, but I also don't want anyone else to know, especially the press. We may have found where he's keeping Emma. Paul and I will be checking it out, and if we're right, we'll be able to make our move right away." "Emma will be home very soon," Earl said confidently. He left after that, reassuring Sam that she would see her mom soon. His heart beat dully in his chest as he added privately that she'd be alive when they found her. As expected, Dobbs supposedly didn't get any useful information from Walter when he placed the call. It was more like he didn't ask the right questions or didn't think Walter had anything useful to tell him. He also told him that they couldn't get conclusive DNA results from the underwear. Earl was actually expecting that. He and Paul had been doing all the necessary legwork to facilitate what they planned to do after the weekend. They had gotten search warrants for both the school and the storage place across the street from the school. They found out that it was once part of the school and was sold to a welding plant, used to store sheet metal. Paul was waiting for him outside when Earl pulled up at his door. It was Monday once again, and Emma had been missing a full 7 days. He waved at Tina and got in beside Earl. Earl relayed what Dobbs told him of his call to Walter, and Paul snorted. Traffic was murder this time of the morning, and they patiently navigated their way in it and parked. Since they already told the chief what they were doing, they were confident that Dobbs would soon scream foul. They had to act quickly before he descended on them. Raphael's PO said that he hadn't reported in for several days, moved from his documented address. There was a warrant out for him. At the school, a clean-shaven older gentleman opened the heavy steel door and ushered them in. He looked at their badges and led them to the main office. There, they were told to wait for the principal. Paul sat and looked around the office while Earl leaned against a wall. On one wall was a picture of the present principal. She was a nun in a modern habit. Her name was Sister Kathleen. Sister Kathleen joined them a few minutes later after she escorted a parent out of her office. "Gentlemen, what can I do for you?" she asked in an over-cheerful voice. "Good morning, sister. May we speak with you in private?" asked Earl. The secretary was entirely too interested in what business the police had with the school. "Of course, why don't you come into my office?" She glanced at the secretary. "Lydia, dear, please transfer all calls to the assistant principal." It was a formal office. Three-quarter dark wood panel walls with commendation plaques besides a portrait of the current pope lined the walls. Sister Kathleen sat at her desk and folded her hands on its surface. "How may I help you?" she asked. "Sister, we have reason to believe that someone may be using either the school or the building across the street illegally," Earl said. He couldn't relax. He sat ramrod straight. The nun and the whole atmosphere in the office brought back childhood memories of school in England, right down to the lemon oil scent that permeated the air. "I see. What proof do you have that this is the case?" "My wife was kidnapped last week, and her captor was seen in this neighborhood. He left a note with a puzzle that fits this area," Earl told her. "What puzzle?" she asked further. Paul took over. "The note stated that presidents and saints share the same closets. This is President Street, and the name of the school is St. Francis Xavier. It is only logical that this locale is being used as a base or a place to hide." Sister Kathleen stared at them for 3 beats. "You do understand, young man, that this is a school and that it is in session? I cannot have you traipsing around disrupting our routine." "Yes, sister. We've also done our research. The man we are looking for is a former student of this school. I realize that 20-odd years is a long time, But we need access to your records. Where would the records be kept? Paul said, showing her the warrant. Sister, a few days ago, I received a package containing my wife's underwear. Do you understand what that means? Earl interjected impatiently. Oh my, I can assure you that there isn't anyone hiding in this building. A few years ago, we had all our records transcribed onto disks. I can access them for you if you tell me the name of the student. You mentioned the structure across the street, did you not? The partners perked up. Yes, what can you tell us about it? Earl asked, leaning forward in his seat. It is the old Lyceum. We meant to tear it down and build a new one. However, the school board sold it to a welding company. They use it to store scrap metal, the sister supplied. He died recently and no one has come to claim the bulk material stored there. You wouldn't know how we can contact anyone to get access, do you? Asked Paul. Of course not, but I would prefer that you do that after school lets out. If there is going to be any kind of police activity, I don't want the children in harm's way. They are my responsibility while they are here, you understand? We understand perfectly, sister. She led them to the records room and pulled up Raphael's records. There was a picture of him. He was a scrawny little boy, and there was a note about an incident with an older girl. Earl read the incident report and asked questions the nun couldn't answer. She was teaching at a different school. The partners thanked her and left. Instead of going to the Lyceum, they walked up the block to 7th Avenue to get a feel for the area and then back down to 6th Avenue. They noted that all the brownstones were in good shape, meaning that there weren't any vacant apartments. It was a family neighborhood. Finally, they headed toward the Lyceum and took stock of it. The Lyceum was a brick building with boarded-up windows and what appeared to be one way in. The steel door had locks on it that looked fairly new, and the roof was flat. There was a shed attached to it that looked so fragile. The partners were surprised it hadn't fallen over long ago. If Emma was locked up in there, it would be tricky getting to her. They were going to need the local precinct's help. Reluctantly, Earl put a call through to Dobbs. At first, he insisted that what Earl told him wasn't remarkable. He said that he had sure leads that he was following, and that if he had any men he could spare, he would send them to take a look. Earl kept his cool and told him that perhaps the local police would be interested and hung up. 10 minutes later, the chief called to ask what he had. After explaining the situation, he told the partners to head to the local precinct and wait for them there. Are you on pins and needles right now? Things are getting real interesting. This would be a good time to become a subscriber. And if you are enjoying the story, hit the like button. Let's get back to it. An hour later, the partners were sitting in Detective Russo's office at the 78th Precinct. The detective had a perpetual scowl on his face. He had a heavy caseload, but he wasn't a fool either. Here was a highly publicized case, and it was sitting pretty in his lap. It was too good to pass up. Before long, other cops gathered trying to get a look at Earl. Dobbs and company arrived 2 hours later and were directed to Russo's office. Noting how crowded the office had gotten, they moved to a conference room. Once everyone was seated, Dobbs cleared his throat and asked for the layout of the alleged building. Half an hour later, they were looking at the blueprints for the Lyceum. Then they strategized. Raphael started to feel uneasy when he realized there was excessive activity on the street. There was suddenly a lot of people around. Did the cops solve his puzzle? He was sure that he would have plenty of time to do all he planned before he would have to deal with the cops. It wasn't a particularly hard puzzle. His son had told him how smart the teacher was. But did he underestimate the cop? School was done for the day, and it was 5 in the evening. He was careful to enter the building through the hole in the back of the shed. He slid a metal sheet across the hole to conceal the entrance. It was dark inside. He used his flashlight to find his way to where he stashed the teacher. He'd been gone 2 days planting his present for the cop, and he'd brought company for the teacher. Throughout the years, he had been keeping tabs on Maribel, and it was easy to snatch her. She didn't even put up a fight. That was until she realized who he was. She was a prostitute and was used to getting into cars with men. As he strangled her, he told her how he suffered all these years. While in prison, he'd been to see a therapist who suggested that he confront her to put his past to rest. Damn, he was right. He felt stronger now. No more fear. Maribel was taken care of, and now for the teacher. Once she was gone, all his ghosts would be gone too. Although there was strange goings-on outside, Raphael felt confident that he was safe inside. No one can get in without him knowing, and he used a forklift he found inside to move a particularly heavy piece of bulk metal to block the hole in the wall more securely. He placed Maribel's body in a corner and went to the closet. He nodded to himself. The bitch was lying on the floor where he had left her. Twice he had to secure her hands and feet because she'd found a way to undo the knots. But he had broken her. She was too weak to do anything but lie there. Emma lifted her head when she heard him enter the closet. There was enough light for him to appear in silhouette. Her arms and legs hurt. He had torn her shirt and split the seams of her jeans. But she was still covered. She had taken to resting to conserve energy to fight him. After every struggle, she'd drink from the faucet and conserve her energy. It had been like that for days. Before she could brace herself, he hauled her up to her knees and whispered to her, "I brought you some company. Remember I told you about her? She's here, but she can't talk right now. Tonight you die, just like her, just like my son. I wanted to kill you just like he died, but I don't have a gun, and even if I did, it would be over too quickly. I'm going to cut you up in so many pieces, they're going to have to sew the pieces together before they can bury you." Raphael laughed and laughed. He pulled out a large knife and cut her free. "Now we are going to have some fun first. Run!" He pushed her along out of the closet. Emma's legs couldn't hold her up and she crawled away. He shoved her with his foot and she fell onto her face. Her face was so swollen, she didn't feel it. Pins and needles attacked her legs and she grunted as blood started circulating through them. Emma ignored his laughter and decided that she wasn't going to die today. She studied where she was and where he was. There were many possible hiding places and she thought to prolong this game they were playing. Her legs felt a little better now and she stood up. She ran as silently as she could from one pile of metal to the next. She stumbled over Maribel's lifeless body and couldn't stop the scream that escaped her throat. "Oh, goody, you found Maribel. That's going to be you, only in pieces." Emma got up and ran to the next pile. She cut her knee on a sharp edge. She covered it with her hand and went still. Come out, wherever you are," he sang. Emma held her breath. She had to live. She was carrying precious cargo. The child Earl had been dreaming about had to live. Only as a last resort would she allow herself to die, and that time hasn't arrived yet. "You are not making this fun. You are supposed to run, and I find you and cut you. Now where are you?" He was close enough for her to smell him, but she took a deep breath and held it. When he walked away, she released it. "Do you know what I did the other day? I went to your house and left a surprise for your husband to find. I wrapped up Maribel's panties and left it for him. It would have been sweet to see his reaction," he cackled. Emma clamped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Earl was smart, but that probably put him over the edge. Her heart ached for him. Suddenly she felt calm. Earl and Paul would find her, and when they did, Raphael was dead. By 7 in the evening, everyone was in place. With the help of the police at the 78th Precinct, they had a SWAT team. 6th and 7th Avenues were shut down. Everyone had been evacuated and secured a 4-block radius. Earl and Paul positioned themselves across the street with the command center. They listened through headsets that the SWAT team was in place and were waiting for orders. Infrared sensors confirmed 2 heat signatures inside the apparently locked building. "Rafael Rivera, this is the police. We have the building surrounded. Release Mrs. Solano and come out with your hands in plain sight," the negotiator said. They waited 10 minutes and announced themselves again. After no response, command gave the order to shoot a smoke bomb through the boarded-up windows. It went through easily, knocking the boards inward. A woman screamed and they heard a male voice shouting, and then nothing. This is a longer video, but stick with me. Things will be happening fast now, and if you've invested time so far, you don't want to miss it. Earl's stomach clenched. He was relieved to hear Emma's voice, even terrified. She was alive. Command asked the marksmen on the roof if any of them had visuals. "Negative," came the reply. Command then asked if the tactical team gained entrance to the building. "Sir, we observed an opening at the back of the building, but it is blocked." The negotiator tried one more time to announce the police presence and waited for a response. They had brought in a locksmith to break the lock. He broke it in a few minutes, but command called for a halt. They wanted to know the location of the victim before going in. Paul felt as useless as Earl. They couldn't do much, and it was frustrating to sit back and let the experts do their jobs. This wasn't a television show where they rush in and save the victim. Earl looked over at Dobbs, who also sat doing nothing. He even looked bored. All of a sudden, there was a loud crashing sound near the windows. With the help of a spotlight shining into the building, they could see flashlight beams bouncing around. "Where are you, bitch?" They all heard clearly. Raphael waved the flashlight, wildly trying to locate her. Emma stayed hidden. Help was here and she was going to get out of here alive. But Raphael was furious. He knocked over a stack of sheet metal. The sound was deafening, but she stayed put. "Mr. Rivera, we have the building surrounded. You will not be harmed if you surrender. Send Mrs. Solano out now," the SWAT negotiator announced. Until then, no one saw movement in the building other than the flashlight beams. Command gave the okay to shoot another smoke bomb into the building. This time they could hear Raphael coughing. But where was Emma? "I don't care how many smoke bombs you shoot in here, she's gonna die. Do you hear me? An eye for an eye," he screamed somewhere near the windows. Earl stood up then. He had to get in there somehow. He wouldn't allow Emma to die. Paul grabbed his arm, but he brushed him off. Quickly, he walked toward the building and entered where the marksmen were positioned on the roof. Paul had no choice but to follow him in. He could hear Dobbs calling them to come back, but they kept going. When they reached the roof, they introduced themselves, and they could hear Command insisting they return and to allow his people to do their jobs. Earl replied that he wasn't going to interfere. At this vantage point, they could see into the building. It was in shadows with some flashes of light occasionally from Raphael's flashlight. It was during those flashes of light that they got a partial view of Raphael, but he was behind some bulk material. They saw only the top of his head and sometimes his arm brandishing what appeared to be a hunting knife. Command asked again if anyone had a visual, and they all answered that it wasn't clear, but they reported the weapon. It was clear to Earl that Raphael didn't care if he died. He meant to take Emma with him. He was angry and has clearly lost control of himself. The angrier he got, the more visible he became. Emma was hiding from him. He hoped she continued to stay hidden. That way Raphael would focus all his attention on finding her and give these men a clear shot. Command continued to ask about visuals, and the answer continued to be negative. Paul watched Earl, wondering what was going through his mind. He was standing there with his arms calmly at his side, and his face gave away nothing. He looked so calm, while he was going through several emotions simultaneously. And then it happened. Tactical announced that they were in the building. They could hear the commotion inside as they broke through the bulky material that kept them out. Then the worst thing that could happen also happened. Emma screamed. The sound was gut-wrenching. Raphael had found her. Now he had leverage. All activity stopped. Tactical reported that they couldn't follow through. Raphael had Emma at knife point. He wasn't stable, and any action could potentially result in Emma getting hurt or worse. Raphael was dangerous, and his life wasn't important anymore. From the sketchy records, he'd been molested by an older student and had never gotten over it. And now he's blamed Emma for his son's death, and in his mind, he was avenging him. To Earl, that spelled one thing. He didn't need a profiler to tell him what was plain as day. He was cleaning house, as it were. Emma was the last thing on his list. However, Earl meant to disappoint him. Emma wasn't going to die. Paul watched his partner. Something was going on with him. He couldn't read him, and that worried him. He was certain that the man standing there and the one who was his partner were not the same person. The man beside him had turned cold and still as a statue. Then Earl smiled. Team B, the marksmen, announced they had a visual. They had a very good partial view of Raphael's head and the knife he was holding against Emma's throat. He was facing the tactical team that breached the building. He shouted at them to stay back. Command felt the up and down emotions of his team members. Tension was building up. His main concern, however, was for the state of mind of one Earl Solano and whether his partner would be able to control him if need be. He couldn't possibly understand what the man was feeling, but he'd be damned if he ruined things. "Do you have a clear shot?" Command asked. "Negative," a marksman answered. "Anyone?" Command asked again. "Negative," came several more replies. Earl tapped the marksman nearest to him on the shoulder. "What is your name?" "Maxwell, sir." "Maxwell, I used to be a marksman in England. I was one of Her Majesty's best. May I look through your sights?" Earl asked the young man. He sounded so calm and relaxed. "Sir, please let me hold your weapon," Earl asked again. He was calm and something Paul couldn't identify. Detective Solano, this is highly irregular. Please stand down and let our men do their jobs, Command said. Sir, with all due respect, my wife has a knife at her throat, and I understand that Raphael means to kill her if someone doesn't shoot. According to protocol, your team has done everything possible to do this without harm to anyone. Raphael isn't going to back down. He is willing to die and take her with him. I just want to see her for the last time. Maxwell shrugged and handed his weapon over to Earl. Paul watched as he expertly handled the weapon. It was an Accuracy International AWM/AXMC. That coldness had descended on him again. It was then Paul understood what was going to happen. He touched Earl lightly. What do you want me to do? I want you to go across the street and gain access to the building where Tactical are facing Raphael. When I give you the okay, I want you to get my wife. Right. Paul left without another word. With all of Raphael's attention focused on the men facing him, he was slowly moving away and more toward the window. Most of his body was obscured by a particularly huge bulk of scrap metal, but it was enough. Not for the marksman, it was enough for Earl. Paul's voice told him that he was in position. Earl took a deep breath and shut one eye. In his mind's eye, he ran over what he wanted to do. If there were no surprises, it will work. Should work. If you take one more step, I'll cut her throat. I don't care if you kill me. She's going to die too. Then he turned toward the window. I'll kill her right now if they don't back off. Do you hear me? Raphael shouted. Command ordered for the men to back away and vacate the premises. Everyone left except for Paul, who had entered the room on his belly. Command asked for the paramedics to stand by. Paul, I know you're in position. I'm going to count to 5, and then I want you to get my wife away from him. You must do it quickly. Paul took a deep breath. Adrenaline was pumping through him, and he felt lightheaded with anticipation. Earl had the biggest set of balls in the whole world, he thought with a smile. Dobbs could be heard protesting and insisting that someone take Earl down. Command ordered him to sit down and wait to see what the detective had planned will work. What happened next happened in a blur. If Paul hadn't been watching, he would have missed it. There was an almost indiscernible buzz, and then Raphael was pitching forward. Paul heard Earl telling him to get Emma. He had to act quickly. The way Raphael was falling, he would surely slit Emma's throat on the way down. Paul jumped up and ran toward them. He barely caught Raphael's arm. The man was huge, and he had to strain to push him backward, while keeping the hand holding the knife away from Emma. I've got her, and we need an ambulance now, Paul said into his speaker. A cheer sounded, and Earl let out a breath. He had succeeded. Emma was safe, and Raphael was dying. Maxwell took the weapon away from him and unscrewed the silencer. He couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. Damn, this man was bigger than life, he thought. The other marksmen crowded around Earl, patting him on the back, but he didn't notice. He couldn't speak, and if the men's momentum going down the street hadn't been there, he didn't know if he would have been able to make it down on his own. He had to see her. He needed to see her. He knew that he had a lot of explaining to do, but what he wanted to do was see Emma. Then the men were moving out of the way as he approached the ambulance. Paul was inside with her. When he saw Earl, he stepped down from the cab to meet him. She's alive, Paul told him. Earl jumped up into the cab and gently touched her hand. Her face was swollen and bloody. She was breathing but unconscious. He looked to the paramedic working on her. He was putting an intravenous line in her arm. How bad is it? Earl asked. She's sustained a blow to the head. That's why she's unconscious, but everything else is superficial. She's been beaten about the face, and there are bruises elsewhere on her body, but the blow to her head is worrisome. We won't know the extent of that damage until we reach the hospital, he replied. Well, that's it for now. For those who stayed tuned, I know you're glad you did. Comment below how you're feeling right now. And for those of you new to the channel, go back to get a full picture to know how we got here. Thank you for watching and come back to see what happens next. Bye for now.